Today we're making a watercolor collage. What I'm using is a 9 by 12 piece of watercolor paper. Cardstock would also work well, but we do need a little bit thicker paper, otherwise it's going to get all wavy. I'm attaching it to a board. We could also use a cutting board or back of a cookie sheet. I'm using masking tape. Blue painter's tape would also work well. I would avoid using just regular tape because I think it's going to tear the paper. We're going to tape it down all the way around just to keep the paper flat when it dries. When paper gets wet, it works a little bit, so we just want to keep it nice and flat. All done. We're going to use watercolors. Use the tube paint. We can use the box paint. But what we want to remember is watercolor needs water. And even if you have the tube paint, you still have to mix it. This is my palette. It has a lot of leftover paint on there because I mix colors. Even if you have a lot of colors available, you do want to mix them up. Most important of all, the water. Paper towels if you have any accidents or you just need to wipe some color off on your brush. The brushes that I like to use, they're natural bristle, and they need to hold a lot of water. If it's really tough bristles, it's just not going to hold enough water to actually be able to lift the paint or lift it on paper. We're going to do wet on wet technique, and we're also going to do dry, which is either we wet the paper like what I'm doing right now, and then we're going to water on the paint. Even, yes, see, it just needs to mix, otherwise it's just going to be like acrylic paint and it won't move. So wet on wet, wet on dry. And I want you to kind of experiment, and this is just going to be the joy of putting paint on paper. So try out all the colors without mixing them, but you see you got to mix it with water. And we're going to try out kind of the same shape, both on the wet paper and on the dry paper. And the color's slightly different. It feels different. Try some of the paint that's already mixed up. Make some nice lines. See, that's wet on wet, wet on dry, and see how we can wet it after we put it down too. A watercolor can really, really move around. And that's even mixing your paint on the paper. If your paper's not very thick, be careful with putting your brush on there too hard because it could tear the paper. So if you have thinner paper, even let it dry when you take a break, or get the hairdryer out too. But this is a little bit thicker, so we can just keep working on it. And also a light touch helps. I'm just checking out what the purple looks like. Maybe some of the more maroon. And as you can see on my palette, I drew out lines and little squares. And actually I wrote the name of the paint on the inside of the box because it makes it a lot easier when you need to replenish. And you're going to see what colors I'm mostly drawn to because it's going to be a lot of pink and orange and even a little bit of black. And you do need somewhere to mix paint. So sometimes the watercolor comes with a plastic box where you can mix on the inside of the lid, or you can use a cookie sheet, and sometimes I have used a piece of foil on the inside. You want something that's not too dark so you still see the colors, or even a white plate or paper plate. Yes, make sure that you're able to wash the paint off if it's something you're going to use in the kitchen later on. Styrofoam plates works really well. Paper plate, you're probably just end up going to have the paint soaking in there, which could be interesting, but that's going to be a different project. Testing out the greens. And I'm just trying to just kind of feel the colors on the paper and just letting things go, just filling it in. And what we want to do is fill in the whole piece of paper and let it dry. And this is a really good way to kind of see what the color actually looks like. And that's the good yellow. It's easy to get the yellow dirty and then it always turns green. Getting the rest of the paper. There's no ugly colors at all, which is so funny because you're thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't do brown on there, maybe we should just keep it bright, but I think all the colors are just interesting. All right, that strong pink is probably one of my favorites because it's such a vibrant color. But see how it's wet on wet, and you do the pink next to the blue, you get a really nice purple, and it just kind of bleeds in. And that's the black right there. Getting some interesting lines on there. And this, just get the paint on the paper. My 7th grade teacher used to tell me, don't be scared of the paper. Because we would all just try to draw as small as possible. And just, she was a really big influence. I went to school in Idaho for a year in 7th grade. And she was always just like, get a mark on there, just make it ugly, just make one mistake when you start, and then everything else is going to get better after that. Got a nice brown on there. See how nice that black kind of has feathers into it? Again, nice pink. And this is all just getting a feel for what the paint feels like on the paper when it moves around. Alright, I let it dry a little bit, but what we're going to do is fill in. You see how it got a little bit lighter when it dried? So now we're going back, and it's not really the wet on wet anymore. Oh yeah, and I cleaned my palette off too, which was necessary. So we're going to do a little mixing of paint. Just get a little bit darker magenta and see what that does. So when that paper's dry, so you're going to have stronger color on the dry paper. Can you just make it a little bit interesting line? Getting some textures on there. Dark orange, light orange. Oh yeah, we still had a little bit of water. It wasn't dry right there. It's just nice when it feathers out. Again, just a little bit of texture on there. And none of this was planned ahead. It's just what happens on the paper. Maybe some dots, dashes, always good. And my blues and my greens on the other side. Notice the yellow's got a little bit dirty, but they'll clean up. Some nice darker blue. He's trying to fill in where there's white paper. It's one of my favorite colors right there, that kind of turquoisey. Cobalt brushing. Nice strong colors. Some good greens. Leaf green. Try to make it, well, not really aiming for an eyeball and or a leaf or anything, but it's nice abstract. I do have an intention for this project, but at this point we could have just kind of looked at what we had and pulled out and made it a face or a bird or wherever else we see. Maybe that's for next time. You can also use acrylic paint to do this, but acrylics, they have a little bit more of film on there and you can't re-wet them. They will dry and then they're permanent. So watercolor, you can kind of move it around a little bit more. But we could do this with acrylic. We had to work fairly fast and just it's a little bit different with the water. And just finding the white spots, filling it in. And black, just give it a little bit more weight. Some nice purple. And it does get a little bit lighter when it dries. This is filling it in. Now we can have this dry, either hit it with a hair dryer before we take the tape off. But just for me needing to borrow the board again. Or we can put a sheet of parchment paper on top, put it on top of the ironing board, and then iron it, which you might want to ask someone to help you with, to get it really flat. But I'm just letting it dry because the paper is fairly thick. So we're going to have two parts to this. What we need is another piece of paper, same size. If you have a piece of cardboard or board or something thicker, but same size, now it's time to use that. But what we're going to do is write on the technique. These are all stuck together, all four sides. Just keep them flat, so kind of hard to get out. Yep. As long as there's wax or some kind of plastic all the way around. So I guess we'll use one sheet. But we want to tape this down and make sure the tape maybe it covers 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So we want to be a little bit more mindful where we put it down. And the masking tape's good because you kind of, it's a little bit see-through, translucent. Oops. There we go. And it's good to just reuse the tape. It's not super sticky like it was after all. There we go. Then we had a little wet paint on the purple there, but it doesn't matter. So I used a round brush on the first painting. I'm just going to use a flat brush. I usually stick with the round brushes and sometimes just the bigger ones because you can go really fine point even if it's a wider brush, and then you press down a little bit more, it gets wider. I usually don't use the flat, but it does cover some space. And this is not going to be, it's going to be a lot looser than the first one. A little bit of purple on there, no matter. Get most of it wet, you see the sheen. I think there was a little bit of brown on that brush, I haven't cleaned it out thoroughly. What's really important after we do any kind of art project, you have to make sure you clean up your tools. And with the brushes, I use like dish soap. You just put a little bit in your hand, you kind of swirl the brush around, but it's really important to get them really, really clean. Watercolor, it'll come back out because you just dissolve it with water, but if you use acrylic, you have to clean them. Alright, we start out with a really nice clean yellow, and we're just getting paint on the paper. So this is just going to dry and hopefully just feather together. It's just so we have something other than a white background. And in the second video, you'll understand how this all comes together. The reason I did 2 videos because you do need to have them dry in between. Or hair dryer, absolutely. Or if you ask somebody nicely, to just put a piece of parchment on top and iron them. Just make sure they're on a good surface, and that way they dry faster. But if it's not dry, the second part won't work. And also we want them a little bit flat. So just fill in the white parts. And I think we're all good. Now you just gotta let this dry and leave it taped to the board. And then it's gonna be nice and fairly flat, but it's good. Thank you.